Hello. Yeah. So welcome to Festive Tech Calendar 2024. My name is Arundam Mitra, and I will be speaking about Diagram as a Code, which is my presentation. It's Saturday, 28th of December. Um, my session is going to be live tomorrow on December 29th. uh, it would be very kind of all the viewers if you can have a look into what I presented, and give me a feedback. But before I start with the whole topic of Diagram as a Code, let me first thank the organizers of the Festive Tech Calendar 2024. First of all, let me thank Gregor, Richard Hooper, Lisa Hoving, Simon Lee, Matthew Boyd, and definitely Keith Artet. And also, they are together, the whole team behind the Festive Tech Calendar. And it's been an extremely pleasure of mine that I am presenting again for the third time in Festive Tech Calendar. So huge thank you to the organizers. So before I start with the topic, which is again, diagram as a code, let me introduce myself. So my name is Arundam Mitra, and I am a cloud services lead by profession. I am based out in Switzerland, and I work in Artspa Solution, which is a trading energy and a trading company based out in Bath in Switzerland. I'm also a blogger. I'm also a public speaker. I am two times Microsoft MVP. The first time in year 2023, I was MVP in developer technologies, and then in 2024, I became MVP in Azure Infrastructure as a Code. I'm also a sessionized active speaker. I am also like a runner, a jogger. This year I participated in 3 half marathons. I am also I love to do hiking, and together in Switzerland, Austria, and Portugal, I have done more than 55 hikings in various different places, amazing places. I love to hike together with my family. I'm also an avid traveler. Very proud to say that I have traveled 25 countries till date, and that is why I call myself as a citizen of the world. So this is a small thing about me, myself, what I do personally, professionally, and everything. You can find all details of mine in my GitHub, which you can see right in the screen. So here you will see that all my awards, how to reach out to me over my email address, GitHub stats, all the stats regarding my blog series, podcast, speaker sessions, and everything. Maybe that few details are not yet updated, but pretty sure that I'll update during my holidays. So this is about my GitHub profile. Um, this is my dev.to, and this is the topic, diagram as a code, and you can see that this is a 3-part series. Of course, in this video I'm not going to cover all the 3-part, but I'll just walk you through, and then I will end up with showing you a demo about how you can generate a solution architecture diagram together with Diagram, Python, and with Azure DevOps. That's the whole idea behind it. But I'll just give you a walkthrough, and I just don't want to make this whole video too lengthy, so that people don't get a chance to see what I'm presenting. So I'll try to be very concise, and everything is very well documented in my blog. It's also there in the GitHub, and feel free to browse it, read it at your own time, check it out, try it out, and if you face any trouble, just write back to me. All details are there in GitHub and dev.to. So this is a little bit about my dev, where I blog. Then this is the Sessionize profile. You can see, as I said, that I was the most active speaker according to Sessionize in year 2023. The results are going to come out about 2024 in Jan 2025, so I'll come to know if I can still hold the status. So this is my Sessionize profile, from where I apply for all the speaker sessions across various communities all over the world. So here you can see all the details which you can find about me. Of course, I have a LinkedIn profile as well, and this is my LinkedIn profile, which loaded just now. So you can see that I am very active in LinkedIn. I try to answer, I try to respond to people as and when I find some time and everything. So feel free to connect with me if you're not connected. Then I have this Twitter profile. I'm not very active in Twitter, so from time to time, I normally tweet about my blogs, but that also in past few months it's been not been very much up to date. But that is only for which I use Twitter. I'm not very active in Twitter, but I just publish my blogs whenever I attend a speaker session or conferences and those kind of things. That is the only reason I use Twitter, nothing else. I don't use personally Twitter for any purposes. Cool. So this is like the final thing which I'm going to present. It's a code-generated architecture diagram using Azure DevOps. So as I said, that I specialize in Azure and DevOps. That's my specialty. I try to automate everything which is possible, which I see that can be automated, and I try to avoid anything which can be done manually. So how did I landed up with whole this diagram as a code and everything? So in my line of profession, what happens is there are two things. Either I have to have a solution architecture diagram which I have to build out, or I have to have a workflow diagram because when I'm doing whiteboarding and everything, so in order for my management to understand, my peers to understand, then I have to do those block diagrams, flow charts, and when I'm doing a technical discussion, then I have to do like a solution architecture diagram with all beautiful Azure icons and everything. So these are the only potential two use cases which I see. But then there is Excel Draw, then Draw.io, Visio. There are so many different tools, but then you have to do it very manually, and sometimes those files are like so static files, they remain in the file system, or somebody is smart enough to upload it in one of the GitHub or Azure DevOps Git repository. But it is still a flat file, which means that you have to again download it because you cannot do anything over Git. You have to again check out, make a local copy, then make some refactoring in those drawings, and then again re-upload it. So in ideal case, it is just like you are using the GitHub or maybe Azure DevOps Git repository, just like uploading a file, a static file, but that is not the correct version control. And since I'm an automator and I write my own codes, and I believe that everything should be by code. I started to do a little bit of a research on the internet that okay, how do I potentially write and code and generate diagrams so that it makes my life easy. Of course, structuring that code, and so that it falls into exactly the same kind of whiteboarding or a solution architecture diagram which you have painted in your head, and to put it in a code, of course it is time consuming, but that's a one time effort which you put, because once you put that, it is by code, which means that any of other engineer in your team can contribute to that, and you are not following the monotonous path of building everything by Visio or something. So of course there can be a debate saying that okay, this is more time consuming, and in Visio we can do it much faster and everything. Of course there's pros and cons, but for me, when I'm writing code, I will not only try to build the infrastructure by code, but I will also try to put the documentation, including the solution architecture diagram, flow charts, also by code. So then it's an end-to-end automation, which I feel as a DevOps engineer, everybody should practice. So what I did is I started to look into okay the flow charts and everything, and in Azure DevOps we already have this Mermaid, so I knew about this. So what I did is I took a topic a very generic topic, that how I look the cloud designation should be. It was in my head, and then I thought that okay, why not to write a blog about what is my view about cloud designations and how the hierarchy should look like, and then I will paint that whole picture by putting it in code. So for the flowchart, I used Mermaid. Now, when I'm using Mermaid and everything, so the first thing you see is that what I'm trying to do. So it's very important that when you're writing an automation, it's the objective has to be very very clear. So I'm creating a flowchart. And when I'm trying to create a flowchart, I also want to do within that flowchart, I also want to do a grouping, which is the second point, create flowchart with using subgraph. It might be that somebody has like the platform where they can use, I mean, they can try this mermaid and everything. Like, you need a platform, right? This is the first thing, which everybody will say, okay, Arindam, you want to do this, but I don't have a platform. Where should I do? That is why, you have the Morbid Life Editor. It is completely free. So use that, and you can build everything by that. Then of course this is my GitHub repository, which is here. You see that this is my GitHub repository, and 01, 02, 03 exactly, it is formulated exactly the way it is here. So I have the series 01 as visualizing this with Mermaid, and then the code generated diagram, which I did first with manually, and then I integrated with DevOps. The structure is exactly like this in the folder. So if you go here, then you will see everything there. So let's go here so that we can correlate. So here you see that my blogs are version control, so you will see exactly all the details out here as well. There is no changes which you see in the blog and something out here. So then like I scroll down, then you can of course go to the overall Mermaid documentation from where I learned that how to use the syntax and everything, and how to build the flowchart and everything. So you can find those links out here. I'm not opening it, feel free to use it in your own time. Then I try to explain that what is Mermaid and a special node, and how I am building the flowchart and everything. So the first thing you have to understand about a flowchart is the orientation. The orientation can be top to bottom, a top down, bottom to top, right to left, left to right, something like that. So you have to first navigate, like in your whiteboard or in your notepad. You have to first draw it out, so that your thought is coming from your brain to a tangible paper, okay, or in a whiteboard or in a canvas, wherever possible. And then you know that, okay, how it looks like. And then after that you can select the orientation, because the orientation is the very first thing, and this is what I try to do. So the flowchart BT means bottom, BT means bottom to top. And then you are mapping it out, like how, like you want to, like one block is connecting to another block. So this is how I did. So if you see, B is pointing towards A, and when you are saying B, in B you see the block as cloud chief, chief cloud officer and chief technology officer. And that is how you slowly navigate, because you are just, because this is what I drew in my paper or in my canvas or in whiteboard. I drew it, and then I started to name it by putting it one alphabet after another. And this is a little bit of a thing that how it does. You see that these are the orientation, that okay, it is going from this to this, it is pointing from. And finally, when you see that here, this is a Mermaid Life Editor, which you see on the left hand side you are writing the code, and on the right hand side the flowchart is getting populated, and you see that this is how it gets created. So this is the code, and then this is how it looks. So even today, if you copy paste this, then it will exactly give you the same thing. So I will just quickly show you how the copy paste works and everything. Okay. So this is by default, which is coming. So I will do nothing, I will just go here, just copy this whole code. Okay. And I will quickly just show one, so that you understand what I'm trying to say. I removed it, so now you see there's nothing, and then I pasted it. You see that you have everything exactly the way it should be. Just remove myself on the left, and you see that exactly how it looks like. So I didn't do anything, so take the sample code and you can play around that how it looks and everything, and you can try it out. Then what I did is very simple, that I have this whole layout and everything, and now what I want to do is I want to group something. Like this is the grouping. So I want to have a platform grouping, I want to have an operations grouping and everything, right? Operations grouping, I want to have an application grouping, because everything is okay, the flowchart is okay, but I just want to group them. And this is what I did it as a second example out here. And you will see that in order to group something and everything, you have to use this particular syntax, which is subgraph platform. So you see subgraph platform, and then whatever you're putting inside this, it will be under that whole grouping, and then you are ending it by putting an end command. Same thing, again at the end, this is the platform. So if you want to do as an operations and everything, so this is again you're starting subgraph operation, everything inside it, this one, and then you're ending it. Let's try it out. So what I'll do is I'll just put the code, copy this code, go to this online, and I'll just go ahead and uh, I will just delete it, paste it. You see, it works. Now all of this, all the code and everything, you can find out here. So this is the folder where you have the thing, and here I have put together the text as well. So nothing to worry, the code is there in my GitHub, it is also there in my dev.to where I blog, so both the examples are here, you can see. So it's all there. So this is how I mitigated my first thing, that okay, when I have to build a flowchart or something, and I can always go to Mermaid, I will try out everything using this, and when everything is okay, then I will just version control this code, because I know that if once I download this code, or if anybody wants to work on this, how it looks, they can always refactor on this code, and that is how I'm actually version controlling the creation of the flowchart. So this way, I mitigated my first problem statement. The second problem statement, which was like the solution architecture diagram. So let me close this, and I will move to the next folder, which is the code generated architecture diagram. So let's go there, scroll up, and you go to the next one. So you see that this is a code, like this is a typical solution architecture diagram which every Azure engineer, Azure architect, everybody has to build, because when the project gets completed, you have to have a pictorial view that how it looks like. So everything is by code and everything, but not everybody understands code. You have to have a pictorial depiction that okay, how the project looks out in a layout, and this is where it's a solution architecture diagram where every component, there's a connector component connecting the services and everything, and that is how you relate that how the flow between the services is happening. So I mean, this is again a tedious job, because you have to do for every project and everything, and as I said, I'm an automator. I love to automate, and I'm a very very lazy guy. So for me, again, doing that in Visio and everything is time consuming. So what I did is like I started to browse, and then I came to know about diagrams. So this is the diagram which I wanted to show. So diagrams is like is offering like that we like it is helping us draw the cloud systems architecture in Python code. So when I started to invest my time on this one, the first thought which came to me was, oh my gosh, I really don't know how Python works. I know the concept of Python and everything, but to write a code, I need to learn the syntax and everything, and I am not a Python programmer, because I work in Azure DevOps, infrastructure as a code, and so on, like Terraform, Biceps, GitHub Actions, Azure DevOps, and so on and so forth, PowerShell, AZCLI. But Python, it's not in my job description, or this is not which I do. Of course, Python is the most popular language, but at least to my sense, I have never written a Python code, and this was my first thought that okay, fine, I got a solution, but it's in Python. What should I do? But I still invested some time, and what I learned was that I will come back to the prereqs and everything, but let me explain you one thing. How I navigated. So I started to understand that how the diagrams is working. So of course, uh, diagram itself is a context, and you are calling basically a diagram class in your Python code. Then you are basically defining nodes, clusters, and edges, which I have given a little definition that how the nodes is, and how the clusters is, and what is the edges. So So these are the four concepts you have to understand. So I told you about diagrams. Now what is a node? Node is nothing but it's just the provider, resource type, and the name. So it is consisting of that. It's a single system component object. When you are combining one or more nodes, it becomes a cluster. And when you are connecting two nodes, that is the edges. So edges is representing a connection between nodes and some additional properties. So that is how I started to understand, because it's very important for me, if I want to automate, I need to understand the hierarchy, that what I have to follow. Then what I understood from the example codes which is there in the documentation is that when you are writing that Python code, first you are basically importing diagram, cluster, and edges. Of course you have to import that, because diagram is a context, and that context you have to of course that context will be defined by a class. So you are basically importing a diagram class. You are also importing the cluster, because you have to you can have a standalone node, or maybe you have to combine multiple nodes together as a cluster, and then you have to join them, so you need an edge. So I'm importing all the three components. Then I'm also importing the provider icons, because with diagrams it's not that you can only create a solution architecture diagram for Azure. You can do for AWS, you can do for GCP, you can do for Kubernetes, you can do for Alibaba Cloud, you name it. It's all there in the documentation. So you have to be very sure that you want to create an Azure solution architecture diagram, and for that you need that icons to create the diagrams. Then the third point is you are basically creating those building blocks using node and cluster. So wherever you feel that the node is doing the job, like a single block, you're using node. Wherever you feel that you have to have multiple nodes, and then that has to be in a logical grouping, that becomes your cluster. And then finally you are using the edge to connect the nodes and the clusters wherever necessary. So this is how I try to understand that, okay, so from the example code, when I'm writing a Python, because as I said, I don't know how to write Python. So how am I going to do it? So the first thing, I have to understand is how difficult it is to write that code. Because it is not that I understood, I wrote it, it's okay. But if I have to sell this idea of mine that this is helpful to my rest of the team members, which means that I have to make it lucid, I have to make it very clear, I have to make that understandable, so that they understand and they can contribute. So this is how I understood that, okay, this is how I'm going to write the Python code. Now, before I explain the Python code, let's go back a little bit, and then I tell you that what is actually required. In order to start this whole thing, diagram as a code, where you are generating a solution architecture diagram with Python, diagrams, and Azure DevOps later, the first thing is that in whichever systems you're running, it needs to have Python 3.6 or higher, it needs to have GraphViz, it needs to have pip installed. And this is where, because this is a blog where I did everything manually, like command line. When I say manually, I mean command line. So I did this, and these are the things, and I showed that this is how the prerequisite looks like. And then I with the command I verified that Python is properly installed, GraphViz is properly installed, pip is properly installed, and this is something. Then the next step, what I did is I installed the diagrams with pip. This is what, and this is how I did it. So all the codes again is my GitHub repo, and you see that I followed this diagram. You see that these diagrams are supported by AWS, Azure, GCP, Kubernetes, Alibaba. As I said, this is the installation document which I followed and everything, how it looks like. These are the examples ones which is there, like AWS and everything. I followed the Azure one, like Azure has this icons and everything, but as an examples, they have AWS, but they also have for Azure and everything. But it doesn't matter, to be very honest, if you understand the concept and everything. And then for the part, for all the provider icons which I'm talking, you see that, if you select on the nodes and you select on the Azure side, on the left hand side, you see that there is, there are all the icons which you require, which is available in Diagrams, and you can use it. So I used all of these. Okay. Now I go back to the part where I have the code, because this becomes interesting. Um, so first I thought that, okay, I cannot, I have to show that how the basic architecture diagrams looks like and everything. So what I did is I went to Azure Reference Architecture and I took one of the, like, for example, a gaming architecture thing, which is my example too. And there's also one which I built, which is the basic app service architecture. If you search in this one with this name, you can easily find it. I'm pretty sure. Let me do that so that you can understand. Cool. So, okay. So go to architecture section. Hopefully, yep. Okay, good. Architecture. I need the search boxes, and if I can put this and I just press enter, you will see that, do I have this? OpenAI, no, but I think this is a web application. Yes, so I took this one. Okay. The first example is based on this one, the basic web application. I just took this one, that, okay, for example, I have to build this architecture diagram. How should I do it? Okay. And this is where so the first thing is you have to write the Python code. So when I was writing it, I thought that, okay, I have to put it in a way where everybody can understand. And putting comments in your code is a very good way, because then you can, if you're coming back even after 6 months to refactor the code, these comments will really, really help you. So the first thing I wrote in the comment is that, okay, what do I need? What are the components I need to build a solution architecture diagram? So these are the ones. 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 8 Azure services. Then I followed the same approach, my understanding. Okay. First, I imported diagrams, cluster, edge, and then I imported the provider icons. The provider icons I know because now I know that, okay, what services I'm dealing with, because I have listed out in my components. So you see these two lines, this line, here I am importing diagrams, and then I am importing cluster, diagram, and edge. Okay, and then I am using all these lines to import the provider icons. So application insights, key vault, manage identities, Active Directory, app services, SQL service, everything. And you see that it's like diagrams.azure. So this is Azure as a provider, and then it changes. So if you are using Key Vault, it falls under security. If you are using manage identities, Active Directory, it falls under identity. If you are using app services, it falls under compute. If you are using SQL servers, it is falling under database. So that is how it is. And so I imported, and then I imported the provider icons. The third step was building the blocks. So then I started to build blocks. You see, these are the nodes. And then when you are using standalone like this becomes a node. When you are using cluster, then you're putting the cluster a name, and then you're putting all the services which you require in that cluster. And finally, here, as a last step, you're connecting the building blocks using edges. And these are the edges which you're using. And then you are just connecting all the things. Then you are just connecting all those things which you have defined out here. So when I saw this example and when I understood the hierarchy and everything, then I found that confidence that, okay, even if I don't know Python, I can still build it. Because if you are understanding this process, then you can just club it together and you can build it. It has nothing to do with Python skills. And this is how I learned, by doing it in a proper way. And then I thought that I will document it in a way so that it becomes helpful for the others. Finally, what I did is, as I said, I was executing everything in this blog, the second series, command line. So I executed with the command. And when I executed this, I exactly got this architecture diagram. Now you see that this architecture diagram which I have and this one, it's little different, but it is doing exactly the same job which this diagram is doing. The user is connecting to this whole cluster, where in the cluster you have the app services, managed identity, and everything. If I go back to my blog, you see that the user is basically connecting to user assigned managed identity, key vault, and app services. Of course, here, they have put one arrow and one box. The only thing which I have done out here is that, this user is basically connecting this, connecting this, connecting this. But how does it matter? Because at the end, you are able to understand that user is basically communicating with all the things, right? You see that Azure Monitor and Application Insight is falling under monitoring as a separate cluster with no connections, right? You see, there is no connection out here. It's an isolated block. I have done exactly like that. So in this way, I learned how to do this. The second example I took was, gaming architecture diagram. So again, if I go back out here, and I just put gaming architecture, and I click on it, you see the first one. Is it the first one? I think it's the first one. Or it can be different one. I don't remember, but yeah, I think let's take this one. So this is the gaming architecture one which I have. Okay, so this is the second example, and if I scroll back, because it's again the same thing, I'm not going to explain you again. It's the same coding style and everything, same thing, and you see that I have generated the same thing. Again, a little different. If you see that it has like a bi-directional arrow like this and this, but in my diagram it is like one arrow pointing this, one arrow. But as I said, the thing which I wanted to reach, the goal which I wanted to reach, it is there. It doesn't matter if I'm adding a multiple arrow. How does that matter? But it is showing exactly the same thing which is being shown as an example architecture diagram in Azure Reference Architecture. So this is what I did in as a part of the second series. Now, scrolling back, now I go to the third series, and which I'm going to conclude. So this is what what I'm going to do is, I thought that okay, now I have done it manually. Now what I have to do is I have to integrate with Azure DevOps. Okay. So before I integrate, before I explain you that how I did it with Azure DevOps, since the pipeline execution will take a little bit of a time, so let's immediately go to the demo section. So I can quickly show you. Cool. So this is my Azure DevOps project, AM Cloud, and this is my repo in the AM Cloud. I have this YAML version 1.0, and if you see out here, if I close everything, this is my structure. Okay. So diagram as a code with DevOps. Okay, so there I have 3 folders: codes, pipelines, and diagrams. So when I'm executing this Azure DevOps pipeline, it will generate the solution architecture diagram, and it will commit that diagram in this folder. You see, in this folder, I've put a README file. All generated architecture diagrams are stored here. And the Python code is here. So I have 2 different Python codes as I've shown you in the previous blog. I have a gaming architecture and a basic Azure services. For the purpose of the demo, we are going to use the gaming architecture diagram. Okay, I will run this code. Okay. Now, when I'm executing the pipelines and everything, I will show you, I normally go to the best practices and everything. So for each of my automations, when I'm running a pipeline and everything, I segregate it by pipeline folders. So here, if you see, I have a separate folder called diagram as a code. And then I'm going inside here. And then what I will do is I will simply run the pipeline. Okay. So let me move myself here. So you can see that there are 2 stages: diagram as a code and commit to Git. Okay. So both the stages I'm running. What I will do is I simply run the code. Now I will click on this one, okay, and I will now I know that it is running behind the scene. Let me go back to the blog and let me explain you this part. So you know that how I developed this whole thing as a and ran it as a command line as a part of my second series. Now in the final series, what I did was I integrated with DevOps. When I'm integrating with DevOps, it becomes a little bit tricky because first you need to have a Azure DevOps organization, projects. Then, in order to do the commit and everything, you need authentication because whenever you're running your pipeline with the service connection, that service connection should have the required authentication to do the necessary activities in the DevOps project, which is a part of the DevOps organization. Now, in the previous ways, we always did it with the PAT token, but that PAT token is not the right approach because with PAT token you have a lot of problems. The first problem is that it is only visible to you, the person who has generated the PAT token, and then you become the point of contact if you need to rotate the PAT token if it is getting expired, because nobody will be able to do that because you did that. That is why what I'm doing is I'm using the system access token. Okay. Then of course in order to configure the service connection and everything, you need a service principal, and that has to have a required RBAC in the subscription so that it can deploy, and then in the you have to have a service connection in Azure DevOps. So these are the requirements. As I said, I tested my pipeline in the Windows build agent only. I wrote this specifically because I don't know what is your test environment, so I have to put every details out here. And then all the prereqs and everything. Now when you are running this in Azure DevOps, you have to understand that you wrote the pipeline, but the execution of the pipeline is happening in a build agent, and this build agent can be a VM in your network, or it can be a VM provided by Microsoft, which we call as a Microsoft hosted agent. So it can be either self-hosted or Microsoft hosted. In my conditions, I'm using a Microsoft hosted agent. Now when I'm using it, which means that my pipeline is executing in the build agent, which means that all this prereqs first needs to be installed in the build agent, otherwise everything will fail. Okay. So again, as I said, everything is in the code. In the GitHub repository, I will show you when I end. This is how it looked like, my code placeholder looks like, because this is very important. When I am reading somebody else's blog, the first thing I try to imagine, okay, how does his code placeholder and everything works, how did he design it? Because it's very important. Because if you don't understand that, you will not be able to relate what the author or what the presenter is trying to write or tell you during his speaker session. So this is why I took a snippet, and this is the screenshot which have and it is exactly the same way which I showed you in Azure DevOps. You have a code folder, diagrams folder, and a pipeline folder. Again, I tried to explain the same things which I explained you about the concept of diagrams, nodes, clusters, and edges. And it's all the same. So the code is exactly the same. Now what I'm doing with my Azure DevOps pipeline. In Azure DevOps pipeline, there is only two things happening. First, of course, it has two stages. In the first stage, I'm installing all the prereqs in the build agent. And then once the prereqs are getting installed, then I am generating the solution architecture diagram. I'm copying that solution architecture diagram from the build agent to the artifact staging directory, and then I'm publishing as an artifact. That is what is happening in stage 1. In the stage 2, the generated diagram which was copied in the artifacts, or which was published in the artifacts. In the second stage, I'm downloading it and then I'm pushing it to my Git repository. That's all it is happening. Okay, and all this mechanism we are doing by system access token, which I will show you. So let's go to the YAML code. So here you see that I have again put together all the notes out here. What is your automation scope? What is important to note? All the variables which I have defined out here, I have also commented, because all you have to do is change the variables based upon your test environment. You have to just change here and nothing below this, only this part. Then this is my build agent, and then in the first stage I am basically installing everything. I'm basically installing I'm checking the Chapolate version, then I'm checking the Python version, pip version, installing GraphViz, then I'm installing diagrams, and once I have installed diagrams and everything, then I am generating that diagrams. Then I am copying the files to the artifact staging directory. Then I am publishing as an artifact. So this ends my stage 1. Now before I explain to stage 2, let's see what happens in my in my execution. You see that the first stage out here, it ran successfully. So it did the checkout. The code was all completely checked out. Then this is the diagram as a code where I am basically installing all the prereqs. You see everything is installing GraphViz and everything all got installed in the build agent. I scroll down. Yes, and you see that everything downloading GraphViz and everything successfully installing every single thing, and then after that you see that you have generated the architecture diagrams and everything, gaming architecture diagram created successfully, everything got it. Okay, then you are copying this file to the artifact staging directory. You just copied this, you see. Then you are publishing to the artifact staging directory. I will show you a little while later. And now my code is waiting here for my next stage where I have kept an approval. So now the diagram has got created and everything, published an artifact. Now in the next stage, I am going to push it to my GitHub, to my Azure Git repository. So I have put a approval stage so that it cannot directly go to the next stage. So now I'm going to approve it, and I go here. So as it is running, we can wait a little while and see that everything is getting completed, and then we come back to the explanation part, because the stage 2 I didn't explain you yet. So this is checking out, and then downloading the artifacts and everything, committing to the GitHub. Perfect. So this is what is this. Now before I move there, I go here, okay, and you see that here in the diagrams folder I didn't have anything, right? I didn't have anything. Now I will just refresh it, and I go down here, sorry, and you see this one, that the gaming architecture diagram got created. So coming back to the code part, so once you have published in the artifact, again I will show you. Now in the next stage I have to commit to the code. So the first thing, I am using a deployment task out here, a job. Why? Because with the deployment job, I can associate an environment, and with the environment I can put an approval stage, the approval which you saw. So that is how I did it, and this is something, right? The system access token which I'm using, I am basically persisting the credentials which I put it as true. Then I am downloading the artifacts. Okay. Once I download the artifacts, then I'm committing it to the Azure Git repository in that location. And here if you see, these are all the standard Git commands which I have used as an inline script. That's all I did. Nothing fancy. And when I am doing this, I am authenticating everything using system access token. So now let's rewind a little bit and show you one by one. Okay, so let's show you that how I published where it got published in the artifacts. So this got completed, I go here. Now you see one published out here, right? One published. So this is the artifact which is getting published. I click on this, I expand, and you see that here is the gaming architecture.png file. So this is the artifact, okay, which got downloaded once I click to my local. Okay, this is the one thing. Now, when I go here in the pipelines, so I have this pipeline, right? So I will just click on this, not this one, sorry. Come back to this one, diagram as a code, and this is the one, okay. Just a second, just edit it, yes. So once you edit this whole YAML code, you will see a variable spot, and in this variable, I have configured the system access token, okay. So if you click on this one, you will see that I'm using those inbuilt Azure DevOps variables for system access token. So this is the system.access token, and then I'm passing this value. So these are all coming pre-built, and this is how I'm creating. So for this particular pipeline, for every particular pipeline where you are trying to use system access token, you have to basically like configure the pipeline, then edit the code, come to the variable section and configure this. So this is how I did it. Okay. And finally, it got generated. So I showed you how the artifacts got published and how I configured the system access token. Okay. So again, try it out in your own thing. Just read every single code of mine, which is here. I have tried to put a lot of comments out here and everything, which you can find out here. Also, finally, I wanted to show you that that all the things out here. So if you go to this one, the last one, which I showed you the demo, you see that you have the code out here. So you have both the Python codes for everything. Then you have the diagrams. Again, I have not committed any diagrams, but as a placeholder, I have shown you that where it is getting stored in the pipelines. This is the Azure DevOps pipeline in my GitHub repository. Have a look in this, and then everything is there. You see that, and I've tried to put as many comments as possible so that it's easy for everybody to follow. So again, everything is out here in this particular code. As you see, you will find everything here, and this is all I wanted to show. So I try to document everything regarding diagram as a code into a 3-part series, which you see out here. And this is what I wanted to talk about in this Festive Tech Calendar 2024. So I hope my explanation was good enough for you to follow. In case if something is not understandable or if something is not clear, please provide your feedback. You can connect me over LinkedIn. You can raise a GitHub issue. You can personally reach out to me on email, and I will respond you. I cannot tell you that I will be responding you ASAP. That would be a lie, because this like all the public speakers or the MVP or anybody who is doing out of passion, out of their office hours, taking out personal family times and everything. So if I say that and I will be replying you to as soon as possible, that would be a lie, but I will respond to you as and when I find time, and that's for sure. So thank you again, and thank you to the Festive Tech Calendar members for giving me an opportunity to present my solution to all the community, all the dev community. Thank you again, and see you next time. Bye.